Okay, so this is my review and reaction of Scream Season 2, Episode 1. I Know What You Did Last Summer. If there was one word to describe this episode, it would be clunky, and another would be rushed. A lot of character relationships in this episode are just rushed to plot convenient points. Like, Emma and Kieran, after all they went through, after all the crap they went through, you would think that you could take a few episodes developing that issues and finally have it come to a head and a resolution, but it seems they have it come to a resolution in the first episode, and it doesn't really get much screen time, so it's just a really rushed resolution. As is Jake and Brooks relationship, I never really thought that they were going to be in a relationship at the end of last season, and it's apparently been 3 to 4 months since the end of Scream Season 1. And during that time, they apparently got really close and he apparently delivered. But I didn't get to see that. All I've ever got to see is Jake, for the most part, being a selfish asshole. And Jake, guess what? In this episode, is a selfish asshole. You get to selfish asshole. You get to see some hints of him being an okay guy, but you don't really get to see any of that. And then their conflict, Brooke and Jake's conflict in this episode, is very forced, very just clunky, and very rushed to get them apart for reasons I won't go into. But there are some things that are good in this episode. As I mentioned before, Emma went through a lot last season, as did Kieran. And while I think it's rushed, I think their relationship is interesting, and Emma going through all that new emotional stuff, as is Kieran going through all that emotional baggage from his dad having died. It's interesting, and they handle it decently well. It's a new aspect to those characters, and I appreciate that. It's something new to watch for this season. Audrey was pretty much the MVP of this episode. She was the one that was the most interesting. Her character wasn't really bogged down by any rush storylines. Everything was flowing naturally and everything. You get hints of what she was involved with Piper last season, but you don't get to what it is. You get a kind of a thrilling sequence at the beginning of this episode with her character, and it kind of ties into other stuff. And just overall, her character in this episode is probably the best handled. Emma's mother's barely in this episode, and yeah, still pretty bland. Noah has become a bit too much of a prick, like a selfish prick who seems to be exploiting his friends, and that wasn't the guy he kind of was last season. I know it's been 3 to 4 months, but you have to show us this before he is just that. He's good here and there, but it just seems he's too uncaring of his friends. I know he's been kind of he's like awkward and stuff, but he's never been completely uncaring, so I didn't enjoy that, but he was entertaining for parts of this episode. And the new killer seems to be very interesting. He's not targeting Emma yet. He's targeting Audrey right now, and that's actually a bit of a breath of fresh air, considering how much Emma was being tormented last season. Now it's Audrey being tormented, and she's actually a much more interesting character than Emma is, so that's appreciated. There is a death in this episode. I won't say who. It says in the synopsis, so it's not too much a spoiler. And the way they handle it is more Saw than Scream, and I didn't really appreciate that part. But it was a pretty nice kill once they finally got to it. And it was of a character that I'm pretty sure most people liked. I didn't really particularly care for them, but it's a well-liked character, and their death will be felt on the show. Other than that, there's still some problems from last season, like too much pop songs, too much teen drama. When it's Scream, it's good to decent. When it's trying to be a teenage drama, it falls on its face epically. Their acting is not good enough to carry a drama. It's serviceable for a Scream story where they're just kind of good character relation things, and then they're also there to die and run away and look pretty, so that works for them. But teenage drama, no, that doesn't really work at all. They've introduced a few interesting characters, some too weird to really say much about, and another that seems helpful, but is he really? I'm not sure. And then there's a new teacher character who also seems like a red herring. They seem to be adding a lot of potential red herrings this season, which is, I guess you could say, maybe better than last season considering how few people there could have been. This episode ends on a cliffhanger, but it's handled rather poorly. Emma's just like, man, it's just kind of over, and it's not really handled that well. But like I said, this episode does have some good elements. The first episode of Scream Season 1 was really clunky as well. So I can give this one a slight pass, but not as much, because this is the 11th episode of the series. It still has some of the same problems. They really need to get over those problems. They've had an entire year to build up to this, and it still has the same problems. But other than that, I am looking forward to finding out who the killer is, kind of seeing what Audrey is doing. They introduced some new plot points for Emma that might be interesting. New characters are interesting. And just like I said, that death is really going to be felt on the show. And other than that, I don't really have anything else to say, but later.